Hello, everyone, and let's get started with our election officer question and answer session for the June 21st, 2022 Democratic Party primary election. We're so happy to have all of you with us, and we're going to answer your questions in a little bit that you may submit live during this webinar. But first, we're going to cover some general information based on questions you've already submitted. For this webinar, I'm happy to be joined by a number of our staff. My name is Ravi. I serve as the election officer manager.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alina Sanak Escobar. I'm the election officer assistant coordinator.
Hi, I'm Abigail Peters, and I am looking forward to hearing all of the questions you have for us today.
Hi, my name is Jean Fauble. I help assign election officers and train them, and I am so grateful to all of you for volunteering to serve as election officers.
Hi, my name is V. I'm also on staff, and I'm ready to get the show on the road.
And of course, we're joined by all of you, our wonderful election officers. So to make sure you're aware of the members of our electoral board, we have a new chair of the electoral board, and that is Christopher Hensel, who's a retired ambassador. We also have Bettina Lawton, who's the vice chair, and Kate Hanley, the Honorable Kate Hanley, as the secretary of the electoral board. Effective earlier this year, we have a new general registrar. His name is Eric Spicer, and he served as our election manager for the past 4 years, so you may be familiar with him. And our new deputy registrar is Cheryl Jones, who used to manage our absentee mail program. We have many important emails and links listed here on this screen. If you have questions about election officer duties, you want to contact that email. If you have questions about voting or absentee ballots, there are different emails and phone numbers for that. And of course, we have resources available to you for more information about election officers, early voting, or vote by mail in general. And we'll present all these links again at the end of the webinar. Now, if you have questions about your specific precinct assignment or what position you're assigned as, make sure to contact us in the office and we can answer that question individually. Or if you're a chief or assistant chief, remember that we may not answer chief specific questions today because we're doing a Zoom webinar just for chiefs and assistant chiefs next Friday. But other than that, we're looking forward to all the different questions you might have today. And as we go through different materials, remember that we have our training website that has lots of content on there that may also prove a helpful refresher before Election Day. Now, all of our chiefs and assistant chiefs receive a manual that covers all of the Election Day procedures. So you don't need to memorize everything that we're going to go over today or that was in your previous training. The chiefs and assistant chiefs have this as a reference on Election Day, and they can check this or they can call us if they have any questions. Something new we're doing this year is we've updated or created many new Election Day guides. So all of these guides will be provided as handouts that the chief and assistant chief can give to the officers performing these tasks. And we've also provided a duplicate copy in the chief's notebook, so the chief and assistant chief have them as well. So for example, you'll see a new guide that gives you information about how to hang signs and posters with images of the various signs and posters. And you'll see that it has a green header, so you know that it's for opening procedures. We have some guides that have a yellow header at the top. Those are for functions that you do during the day. So for example, this is the handout that you would have at the check-in table, and it gives you reminders about what the officers at the check-in table need to do. We have guides for closing procedures. They have a red banner at the top. So one of the new ones we have is for securing voted ballots. You see that one on the left. And as always, we have our return checklist. So that way, during election night, when you're very tired and you're just trying to get out of there, you can follow the checklist, make sure you pack everything in the right place, and then you're on your way out. Let's go into an overview of this election. This election will be a Democratic Party primary. It's only in the 8th Congressional District, which covers about 1/3 of our precincts along the eastern portion of Fairfax County. And as you can see on the sample ballot, there's only one contest this election, and that's for U.S. House of Representatives in the 8th Congressional District. Now, even though this is a Democratic Party primary, remember that we do not register voters by party here in Virginia. That means any qualified voter may vote in this election, and you should never ask a voter for their party affiliation. What you do want to make sure is that as every voter checks in, that they understand that they are checking in for a Democratic Party primary. Otherwise, you may have some individuals who check in and realize they don't want to vote a ballot in a Democratic Party primary. And then you end up with a fleeing voter or someone who leaves after being checked in without casting their ballot. So it's so important to make sure, if you're assigned as a check-in officer during the day, to make sure you're reminding each voter which election they're voting in. So let's talk about COVID. Just like all of you, it's been a tough 2 years for us here in the office and as we managed different election operations, but we do kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel now a little bit. For this election, based on current CDC and county guidance, face masks are now optional for voters, election officers, and authorized representatives. That means no one is required to wear a face mask in the polling place, but anyone may choose to do so if they want. So you may see some election officers wearing face masks and some without, and that's okay. We're also continuing to provide some PPE supplies to each precinct. We'll still be issuing clear acrylic sneeze guards for use at the check-in table, the ballot table, and the chief's table. We'll provide a box of face masks for election officers or voters that want to wear one. Hand sanitizer for voters to use as they exit the polling place, and disinfectant wipes to periodically wipe down surfaces as needed. Now, one question we get is, what will my duties be on election day? If you're a first-time election officer, there are a few different duties you'll rotate among during the day. You may be assigned to monitor the entrance and the drop box. You may be asked to be positioned at the check-in table and check in voters. You may be at the ballot table, where you will take voter permit cards from voters and exchange those for a ballot. You may be positioned near the voting booths, where you would guide voters to an open voting booth and remove any materials left as voters exit the voting booths. Or you may be near the DS200 scanner and provide guidance to voters on how to scan their ballot on the ballot scanner. And of course, give them an I voted sticker. Now let's talk about poll pads and check-in. For this, I'm going to turn it over to Alina.
Thanks, Ravi. To start us off, I want you all to know that we have brand new poll pad devices. They are faster, but other than that, work the exact same as the ones that you may have used in the November or the past June election. So you don't have to learn anything new, but they're a lot easier to manage. Instead of coming in one big case and then finding all the peripherals in that gray bin in the gray cart, you're going to find everything that you need in the same case. It's about the size of a big laptop. Once you open it up and take the iPad device out, you'll see just in the image on the right, you have the base, the charger, and the ID holder all in the same place. So it'll be a little bit faster to set up. A couple of check-in reminders. Just want to remind you that you do have to repeat the voter's name audibly, not the address, by law for every voter. A good thing that I like to do is say, I am checking in Vicky voter for the Democratic Party primary election. That way you're also reminding them the election type. It's important that you remind them of this before they check in, before you get to that step, and before you hit submit on the poll pad. Another reminder is that you cannot ask a voter for their driver's license if they provide a different form of ID. You're welcome to inform them about what the various acceptable IDs are, but by law, you cannot ask for a driver's license if they present a different form of ID. You don't have to remember all of this. You'll have a handout right by you at the check-in table. It'll have all the instructions A through Z on there. Another very, very important reminder is that you need to see this screen exactly as it appears on this slide to know that you've fully checked in a voter. When you're checking in a voter, you'll have two opportunities to review their information. You'll see a submit button, and then you'll see the accept button. Once you get through the whole process, you'll see this screen with the voter's name in large green print. That's how you know that you've fully checked in the voter. Now I'm going to go through just some general questions that you all submitted. These are our most commonly asked questions. The first question is, how will I know which room to go to and other details of the polling place? Your chief is going to let you know. Chiefs are getting their precinct rosters by today. It's our goal. So they should be contacting you all soon. They'll contact you by email or by phone about a week before the election. So even though they might get it today, they're probably going to take some time to draft up an email, contact the polling place, make sure they get the details from the polling place. Once they have that information, they'll pass it along to you. If you have general questions, feel free to send us an email or give us a call. The next question is about meals. How should we handle meals? Should we bring food for the entire day? Yes, you should bring everything that you need with you for the day. That's food, medicine, any reading material. You can't leave the polling place, so bring everything that you need with you. You're welcome to leave something in your car and go retrieve it during the day. So you are allowed to leave the voting room, of course, go outside, get some fresh air, use the restroom, get something from your car, but you can't leave the polling place. So even if you live across the street, you can't make a quick stop to go get your lunch and come back. If a family member or a friend is dropping something off for you, that's totally fine. If you forgot something, give them a call and they can bring it to you. The next question is, what should I wear? Remember that you're representing the entire county on election day, so dress appropriately. Wear something business casual. Jeans are fine as long as they're clean and unripped, and do remember to wear comfortable shoes. I would also recommend bringing some layers, especially in schools. Temperature can fluctuate throughout the day, so come prepared. The next question is about voters. Are they permitted to bring signs or wear clothing that clearly supports a candidate? Yes, so voters can wear clothing that supports a political candidate. Remember that you as an election officer cannot. The other thing that voters cannot do is bring in signage or do any campaigning inside of that 40-foot prohibited zone. The next question is about authorized representatives. So authorized representatives represent the party, or in the case of a primary such as this one, they represent a candidate on the ballot. They'll come to the chief with proper documentation, and the chief will give them a badge that they'll wear throughout the day. Authorized representatives are part of the process. They're there to observe any election operations, but they should not interfere with voting throughout the day. You may have some authorized representatives as early as 5 a.m. They are welcome to be there to observe opening procedures, but they can't touch any voting equipment or any ballots. You can have authorized representatives during the day and during closing. Just like you, they cannot report results, so they can't leave the room or contact anybody until the results have been posted. The next question is about our collector officers. So our collector officers are officers who bring back the flash drives with the voting results from the DS200s back to our office, the absentee ballots back to our office, and a new form that we're going to discuss with our chiefs and our collector officers specifically a little bit later. Those are the 3 items that they have to bring back. So our collector officers leave the polling place at around 7 p.m. once the DS200s have been shut down, and bring that information to us so that we can provide results sooner. So those are going to be the flash drives, and we need all 4 flash drives. So every precinct has 2 DS200s, 2 flash drives in each. We need 4 flash drives back. Even if you don't use one of the DS200s, you should still open it up. That doesn't mean go through the whole opening procedure, but just open the lid, retrieve those flash drives, get the 4 in that purple pouch, any absentee ballots that are deposited in the absentee ballot drop box, and then a form that's going to have some numbers that the collector officers and chiefs will work together on. Then the 2 collector officers are going to take those 3 items, drive together in the same car, and come back to the Fairfax County Government Center. Note that if you're a collector officer, you have to come back to the main office, the Fairfax County Government Center, even if your chief is doing their material return at the Mount Vernon Government Center. If you go there, you're going to have to come all the way back here. So make sure that you know where you're going before you get in the car to drive away. The next question is again about our collector officers. Since collector officers leave at 7 p.m. and are not part of closing procedures, they're not going to sign any closing documents. So they're not going to sign the SOR. If you're a collector officer, make a list of the things that you do have to sign and what you don't have to sign. So don't leave the polling place without signing the compensation sheet. That way we can pay you. As a chief, they might write collector officer on the SOR just as a helpful reminder that you don't have to sign, but that you were there. So just keep that in mind during closing. I'm going to pass it back over to Ravi to talk about early voting.
I hope all of you have already taken the opportunity to vote early if you're participating in this election. If you live in the 8th Congressional District, you definitely want to do that. So that answers that question right there. Should you vote early? Yes, of course. And the reason we always encourage you to do that is if you're not assigned to your registered precinct, or for some reason we have to ask you to go to a different precinct right before Election Day, this way you already have it taken care of and you have nothing to worry about. So for this election, where can you vote early in person? We have 6 early voting locations. Right now, the Fairfax County Government Center is open, and beginning this Saturday, 5 additional locations will open for a total of 6 early voting locations. The last day to vote early will be the following Saturday, June 18th. And you can visit our website for more information. If you want to see the sample ballot, you can also visit our website and review the sample ballot for this election or in the future for any other upcoming election. We, of course, have an absentee ballot drop box positioned outside of our office, outside the Fairfax County Government Center, and it's available 24 hours per day and is monitored by a camera. And in addition to that, as in many of the past elections, we have absentee ballot drop boxes at each early voting location and at each precinct on election day. So you or any other individual can also deposit your voted absentee ballot in one of those. Let me hand it back off to Alina to talk about absentee mail ballots.
All right, let's go through some questions about absentee mail ballots. The first one is, I received an absentee ballot in the mail, but I don't remember applying for one. How could this happen? So some of you might know there's a permanent absentee ballot list. So that means that you can sign up to always receive an absentee ballot for the elections for which you are eligible. You may have signed up for this and you don't even know. It's the first option on the absentee application. Anybody who was on the annual list might be on the permanent list. If you'd like to change that, just give our office a call, check on our website, and you can change your preferences. So if you would like to enroll in the permanent absentee list, you can also do that. Give our office a call, go to the citizen portal, and you can make that selection. Now, as an officer, what should you do if a voter brings an absentee ballot to the precinct? They have several options and you should go through all of them with them. The first is that they can simply put it in the drop box. Again, any officer, or excuse me, any voter can put their mailed absentee ballot into any drop box. So even if they're not registered at that precinct, just happens to be closer to their home, they're welcome to do that. The other option they have is they can still return it by mail on election day. Ballots need to be postmarked by election day and received in our office by 12 p.m. on the Friday after the election to be counted. So if they'd like to put it in the mail, they're welcome to do that. If they'd like to surrender their absentee ballot and vote in person, they can do that as well. The chief can help you with this process. As long as they have that ballot in the envelope with them, they can bring that to the check-in table. The chief will help you go through this and they'll exchange that ballot for a ballot that they can then vote on and scan on the DS200 on election day. Couple of questions about drop boxes. So the first thing is that voters are not required to provide identification or identify themselves when they place a ballot in a drop box. It's just like putting it in the mail. Can someone deposit a ballot for a spouse, family member, or a friend? Yes, voters are permitted to place more than one voted absentee ballot in the drop box by law. And again, can any voter use the drop box? Yes, any Fairfax County voter can deposit a Fairfax County absentee ballot in any drop box. That can be here at the Government Center, at one of our satellite locations, or at a precinct on election day. What about curbside? Somebody who is in a car coming at curbside may vote regularly on election day, or they might have an absentee ballot. They can ask the election officer to bring that ballot from their car to the drop box. You may have a car full of people, a whole family coming together to vote. You can take their ballots together to the drop box. You might have somebody who brings their ballot and their spouse's ballot to curbside. You can take both of those ballots and deposit them in the drop box for them. And you should not question the voter's need as to why they need to vote curbside. Now let's get to some of the questions that may have come up during this webinar or that you brought for us to answer live. You can use the Q&A box at the bottom. We have Jean and V here who are going to pose the questions for us. And remember, if we can't get your question today, just send us an email, give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to help you. I see some questions coming in through the Q&A already. So I'm going to go ahead and take this down. And at the end, I'll put back up the list of emails and phone numbers if you weren't able to get to your question. But as questions come up, just put them in the Q&A, not in the chat box. And we'll try to get to as many as we can today.
Okay, thanks, Selena. So our first question is, could you repeat the alternative location for the chiefs to drop off their materials? I know the main location is the Fairfax Government Center, but you mention another name, correct?
Yeah, we do have an alternative drop-off location for people who live closer to the Mount Vernon area. You can drop off at the Mount Vernon Governmental Center on election night.
Another question we received is, and asking for something Ravi had said. Ravi, did you just say that the absentee ballot collection boxes will be monitored by camera? Will at least one election officer still need to have eyes on the box at all times?
That's a great question. I apologize. I should have clarified a little bit more. So I showed you pictures of each of the different kinds of drop boxes. So we have a permanent drop box that is attached to concrete outside of our office at the Fairfax County Government Center. Because it's a 24/7 drop box, it is monitored by a camera because obviously we can't have staff here overnight during the entire 45-day early voting period. So that drop box, that one drop box, is securely monitored by a camera. Separately, we have drop boxes at each of the early voting locations at each of the polling places on election day. Those drop boxes are only available during voting hours, and those drop boxes are monitored by an election officer or election staff member. So no change in procedures from past elections. One of the election officers in each polling place still needs to be assigned to monitor the drop box throughout the day. We encourage that to be the individual serving as the greeter. So the drop box will be positioned wherever the greeter is, whether that's just outside the building entrance or just outside the voting entrance. And of course, that individual will be rotated throughout the day. So one person, one officer might take the first 2 hours of the day for that shift. Someone else would take over for the next 2 hours, and so on and so on. I hope that clarifies that question.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. So the next question's about procedures. Are there any key differences between the procedures for a party primary versus a regular election?
That's an excellent question. So yes, there are some differences, but 90% of what you do is going to be the exact same as a general election. So the biggest difference is that voters are checking in this case, for a particular party's primary. So it is so important for both the officer serving as the greeter and the officers at the check-in table to make sure that each voter understands that for this election, they're checking in for a Democratic Party primary. We would really like to minimize, or hopefully just not see at all, is a voter checking in and then realizing that they didn't want to vote in that party's primary. There are some differences, small differences, for what a chief might need to do, but that's accounted for in the different forms and things. And there's some different rules about who can serve as an authorized representative or a poll watcher. So in a party primary, authorized representatives need to represent a candidate on the ballot, not a particular party. So in this case, if your polling place should have any authorized representatives, then they would need to be representing one of the two candidates that's on the ballot. Alina, is there anything else you can think of that would be different for our chiefs or other officers in a primary versus a general election?
No, that's the big one, is just to remind voters what kind of election they're coming in to vote for. Other than that, the only difference is that you might have a little bit of a slower day this June, but other than that, all of the procedures are the same. Still just as busy over here. We're going to get everything out to you. So that's really the big thing, is just to remind the voters what kind of primary is going on in your precinct.
There's one other difference, and that is that no write-in votes are allowed in a primary.
That's a great one. Thanks, Jean.
Okay, so we received a question, and it comes up from the issue of redistricting. So someone asked, what happens if, due to redistricting, a voter who used to be districted in the 8th congressional district shows up to vote, but they are now redistricted to the 11th congressional district?
Okay, let's kind of take that step by step. I'm going to go back a little bit to kind of set up this scenario, and then you all can help me if I miss anything. But let's say, for argument's sake, that I live at 12,000 Government Center Parkway, and that used to be part of the 8th congressional district. I used to vote, or I still vote, at 132 Monument. That's our precinct right here in the Government Center. If, because of state level redistricting, my whole precinct is now in the 11th congressional district, 132 Monument is not going to be open for voting because there's not a precinct. So what I would probably do as a voter is come to this precinct if I had not looked at my mailing, not been paying attention to the news, not really knowing what's going on. That could happen. I might show up to my precinct, which wouldn't be open because there's not a primary. Now, I might live much closer to the 8th Congressional, what is now the 8th Congressional District, and come to your precinct that is part of the 8th Congressional District. I wouldn't be eligible to vote in this election because there isn't a primary in my district. So again, you would do the same thing that you do with any voter. You would explain the situation, you can show them on a map, you can help them look themselves up. If the voter insists on voting and they'd like to vote, the chief may offer them a provisional, the chief may call our office so that we can give them more information. But the short answer is that it's unlikely that somebody who lives in the 10th or the 11th Congressional District is going to come to your precinct because their precinct isn't going to be open for voting.
Okay, thanks, Alina. Next question is about the absentee ballot drop box. Where is the drop box supposed to be located? Inside the polling place or outside?
So each precinct receives an absentee ballot drop box, and it should be positioned in a place that best serves the voters. So generally speaking, that's one of two places. One would be, if possible, just outside of the building entrance. So that way voters can see the drop box from outside. And that would also be where the election officer serving as the greeter would need to be positioned so they can also monitor the drop box. If that's not possible at your polling place for some reason, that's okay. Then the drop box should be positioned near the voting room entrance, either just outside or just inside. And that applies to the building entrance as well. It could be just outside the building entrance or just inside the building entrance. But in general, that's where the drop box should be positioned. But it's so important to remember that an election officer has to monitor that drop box at all times. And like the other duties that election officers perform on election day, that position can be rotated among other officers. It's just that the first officer should not leave the drop box until another officer has arrived to replace them.
I'm going to bring up one of the first questions submitted in case not everybody attending this Zoom has seen the answer. Will the instructions for this election include a photograph of the well-packed gray cart so that it's so much easier to pack it up during closing when everybody's kind of tired and can't remember what it looked like when it first arrived?
Jean, do you actually want to answer that one? I think you played an important role in the answer to that question.
Yes, due to popular demand and many requests by election officers, the chief's notebook and the handouts now include 2 photographs of the gray cart. One with the contents as delivered, so that's what it's going to look like in the morning. And then for closing with a different color scheme, a picture of what the cart will look like when it's packed up for return. And below the photographs is the inventory with showing exactly which shelf each item gets packed on.
Nice, thanks, Jean. Okay, so the next question is about breaks. So someone asked, oh, since we're working long days, sometimes I've been given a break during later on. What do I do to fix this?
I'll take that question because it's something that we hear asked quite frequently, both before election and after election day. Everybody should get a break throughout the day. Your chief is responsible for rotating people through positions as well as giving you breaks for bathroom breaks, just to clear your mind, get away from crowds, and of course to eat and have snacks. If you are not rotated regularly, if you'd like to try a different position or you need to take a break, a comfort break, or to get something to eat, and your chief hasn't offered you that chance, feel free to bring to the attention the fact that you're ready for a break and somebody needs to cover your role for that period.
We have a question, and I think we know what the answer might be, but are election officers allowed to call outside lawyers for advice about a voter or voting method?
So if you encounter any issues on election day that you're not sure how to handle, the first thing you should do is yell chief, get your chief involved. They receive additional training and they may have served in many elections, and they may know how to handle a particular situation. If the issue needs to be escalated, then what we instruct chiefs to do is to call our office. And so then all of us as staff, our general registrar, or other staff or other individuals working in the Office of Elections can assist and figure out what the situation is and what the right thing to do is. I've never heard of or encountered a situation where someone would need to call outside lawyers, certainly not an election officer. So I just don't think that's something that needs to happen or is going to happen. Simply put, if you run into something you're not sure how to deal with, either first talk with your chief, or your chief can call the office and we'll help them through it.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. So given that this election will be slower than others, if there are few people towards the end, can we start cleaning up or packing up early?
You know, I get it. My very first election that I served as an officer in, we had 31 voters all day. Every time I got to a good place in my book, another voter showed up. And of course, we were happy to serve them. But it was a bit of a slower day. For this election, based on what we're seeing at the early voting site that's open right now, we think it is going to be a bit of a lower turnout than what we're used to in some past general elections and primaries. So you may have a bit of a slower day. That said, the procedures that need to start after 7 p.m., after you begin closing procedures, still need to wait for that, because you never know when a voter may arrive. You may have a group of voters that arrive, at 6:55 p.m., 6:59 p.m., and you don't want to do things like taking down the signs that they may need to review or other things like that. What you can do, and what we instruct chiefs to do, is to start planning for closing procedures at an hour or 2 hours before closing procedures begin. What I always used to do as a chief is I'd be going through, making my checklist, double checking what needs to get done, assigning those duties to different election officers, making sure they understood exactly what they need to do as soon as the polls close and things like that. And I remember my very first election as a chief, it took us about 2.5 hours to close everything down. By my last election as a chief, we had it down to about 45 minutes. And the reason we were able to do that, even though we didn't start anything early, is because of planning and preparation during some of those slower periods at the end of the day.
So we have a question about the voter referral sheet. Its use is optional, correct? And do most chiefs use it, or do most chiefs not use it?
Thanks, Jean. So the voter referral worksheet is a sheet that chiefs can choose to use at the check-in table. It is optional. Some chiefs do like to use it. Some chiefs choose to skip it. The purpose is for the check-in officer to give a little bit of information and then pass that form along to the chief so that it can quickly scan, get some of the voters' information, and know what the issue in front of them is. It's really up to your chief if they want to use it. Some like to use that. Some have a different method. Some find it very helpful. So it is there as a tool for you to use, but we don't want it to become a burden. So work with your team, work with your chief. If you find that it's very helpful and helps you keep track of what's happened throughout the day and helps you skip a little bit of having the same conversation twice, once at the check-in table and then once at the chief's table, go for it. If it's slowing down the process, then your chief may choose to not use it. Either one is okay with us. We want to give you this tool so that you can have the best experience with non-routine voters as possible.
Okay, next question. This one's a clarification question about leaving the premises. Is it true that now we can leave the building as long as we do not leave the grounds where the polling is taking place?
Thanks, V. Yeah, we've had some clarification on this. So the law is that you cannot leave the polling place. It's okay if you, of course, leave the voting room. Most bathrooms are not in the voting room. You might need to go outside to monitor the drop box. You might need to go outside to collect signs. All of those things are things that we have done. We just want to give you that clarification. So of course, you're going to have to go outside to set up signs, take down signs, assist curbside voters. You might want to step outside just to get some fresh air. All of those things are okay. You can't leave the polling place premises. What you shouldn't do is go hang out somewhere else in the building just to get a change of scenery. So use that responsibly. If you want to take your break outside, that's more than acceptable. It might be a nice day. We're hoping for it. Hopefully it's not too hot and it's not too rainy. But yes, you just can't leave the polling place premises, but you certainly can and will have to leave the voting room.
This question deals more with future preparation, planning, thinking about Are you starting to think about now about potential security issues in the November elections and planning for how you're going to give guidance on that?
Sure. So what we do is we are currently in the process of planning concurrently for both elections. So we're obviously in the final stages of getting ready for the June primary, but we've already begun many preparations for the November election on many different fronts. There are different things that people have alerted to us, concerns that they may have, or things they want us to keep in mind. And we are taking all that into consideration. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. We're doing a lot of preparation for November. We're going to hit the ground running in July as soon as we close out the process for this June's election. And we expect to be informing all election officers about many of those things over the summer months.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. This is the last question that we have on our end, unless you all want to submit more. But this was in the beginning of the slides. But if you missed it, the question is the primary open to all voters, regardless of party?
Yes, yes, certainly yes. So in Virginia, voters do not register by party. That means that a voter may choose to vote in any party's primary during any primary. So this time around, since we're having a Democratic Party primary only, any voter can vote. The other thing to note is that you wouldn't know because you cannot ask a voter their party affiliation. If you had a dual party primary, which we don't this time, but if you did, you always ask the voter what ballot they would like, not what party they affiliate with, but what ballot they'd like. This time there's only one choice, so you just remind them that there's a Democratic Party primary only, and that's the ballot that they can vote. But again, yes, any qualified voter can vote in this primary. Thanks, V.
And with that, it looks like we've answered all the questions that have been submitted. Oh, pardon me, I see that there's one or two that just came in. So Alina, if someone asks us about how to vote in the Republican Party primary, what do we tell them?
That's a great question. So since the Republican Party has chosen to select their candidates through different means, we can't really help them with that process. They should contact the Fairfax County Republican Party or any Republican Party contacts that they may have, and they can get them the right information. We're not involved with that process right now, so I can't really give you any good information on that. That's going to be your best source.
And then I see that our last question that came in was about the preferred voting method used at our early voting locations last November. So if any of you voted early at one of the in-person voting locations in November, you may have been guided, you may have been given the option of using either a paper ballot or voting on an express vote. So that was something we did in November. And part of it was because we had more than 200, almost 250 different ballot styles that we had to accommodate. So what we've been able to do now, though, for this June and this coming November, we expect, is we are now using ballot on demand printers. So when you go to vote at an early voting location, we print on demand the ballot that you need for your particular precinct. So now that is the primary method of voting. And the reason we're doing that is we want voters to have the same experience, whether they vote in person before Election Day or in person on Election Day. And that is that you have the option of marking that paper ballot as you usually would, or if you'd like, you can still choose to use the express vote. Any voter may choose to use the express vote. So that's just one of the changes that we've made this year, as we've heard your feedback and your insights based on not just your experience as election officers on Election Day last year, but your experience as voters. So as we close out today's Zoom session, I just wanted to say that we so much appreciate all of you for serving. I know sometimes for June elections, it may affect your vacation planning. You may have wished you could get just a little earlier start. So we appreciate you not doing that and serving with us in this election. We couldn't do it without all of you. We've had some changes in our office over the past few months. We've had some changes in our policies and procedures. And a lot of that is just based on what we hear from all of you and what we saw that worked well or didn't work well. And as we look ahead to both the June and November elections this year, we're looking forward to putting into place the best practices we can and what we can do best to support each of you as election officers. So if you have any feedback, if you see something that's not quite working well or something that you think we can do better, feel free to let us know. So on behalf of all of us here in the Office of Elections, not just Alina and Abigail and Jean and V, but all of us, that work together to plan these elections, prepare these elections. We want to say thank you. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for serving on Election Day in June. We hope you have a great experience, and feel free to reach out to us anytime by phone or email if you have any questions. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.